And then as far as like creating, you want to call it alliance, I see Max Kaiser saying that this is a Trojan horse. I see other people that are kind of the super evangelistic of one particular product of Bitcoin. Um, is there anything that basically wins favor, by the priests? Like, do they win favor because it's spot, and do they win favor because it's teaching, to eventually off ramp into your own custody and keep the narrative that this asset class is different than anything else that's traded in legacy. Like, it's different because you have possession. Like, that's the thing is there going to be an alliance, or is this going to be like a continuing war?
That's a great question. I couldn't answer on behalf of anybody, say at Blockstream or something. I don't really know what their internal charter is, or what their internal goals are these days. But it does seem like the different implementations of Lightning Network, that they were all being designed in preparation for the passage of spot ETFs or other instruments like this, so they can suspend some of the value off chain, but still have it somewhat trackable. I mean, there's been a lot of development effort, I think, in preparation, laying a foundation for this. I think that's about as much ecumenical support as you'll get from, I think, the laser-eyed maxis and people who are trying to push these ETFs. Other than the fact that you got a lot of folks wearing laser eyes who, realistically, the only thing they're interested in is a higher fiat-denominated value of their current bags, their current holdings, and they're willing to sacrifice the goose that lays the golden eggs in order to get it, right? In order to realize that event, being able to realize that profit. So unfortunately, you got a massive shift, or a massive schism, right, in even among the maximalists about what they do want to openly support and what they don't. And I think, by their fruits you'll know them, right? The people who are saying, yeah, man, I can't wait till this ETF passes. It's gonna absolutely send Bitcoin. Well, a lot of them just a couple of years ago, when their bags were down, right, when their P&L was negative, then they were talking about all the cypherpunk, essentially, Bitcoin manifesto, rather Bitcoin white paper as a manifesto type cypherpunk language. We are all Satoshi, and this is freedom money. And but now, with the prospect of real world gains, right, some of them having a massive come up, right, by a 5x or a 10x in their Bitcoin bags, they're very tempted by that. More tempted by that than by the permissionlessness of layer one Bitcoin that is not being held custodially. So, Gary, it's a brilliant question, but I think even among Bitcoin maximalists, even people at Blockstream, right? You got Adam Back, right? The guy who created Hashcash and contributed to Bitcoin Core at its earliest iteration. He's talking about how, like, oh no, ordinals are normal, and this is, it's permissionless, so we're going to see this. Ordinals are at odds with ETFs too. There's so much. The Bitcoin maximalist community is very fragmented right now. Very, very fragmented right now. Sorry to reuse that terrible filler word, but the Bitcoin maximalist space, you can't talk about it as though it's one single ideological block. It just isn't. Dr. Cap, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, I think it follows from what you've said, and I've got a question at the end of this as well. Following from what you've said, ETFs on a very superficial level don't sound very cypherpunk, and they're not. And being completely serious with you, from a cypherpunk perspective, I'm not interested in it. But it goes back to like my little soliloquy about absorbing liquidity into a harder form of money. These ETFs will get promoted. And I think that the question I'm going to ask for you, actually, and this is what I don't know, are any of these ETFs going to be fractional in nature? So is it that, you buy X amount with the premium, but then at that moment in time, they may only hold a certain fraction of what they're supposed to? That's a question that I would like to know the answer to, if some of these ETFs are going to be like that. And that is linked to what I'm about to say, which is that if it's non-fractional, then you're going to see one-to-one transfer of liquidity. And yes, that will be predominantly for speculative reasons. And the initial thing is going to be, look, there'll be a lot of advertising from BlackRock and all the people pushing the ETFs and saying these are great products. But going back to what I said, you're not going to see every pension fund jump on this, because the reality is a lot of big firms are essentially managing very large numbers of assets, which they need to manage in a way that can be perceived as safe. And I think Bitcoin is still viewed as a risky asset by a lot of major firms. That's the reality of it. And in particular, this goes to pension funds. So I wouldn't be expecting pension funds to dive onto this, but I do expect a lot of more firms that may still have very large sums of capital but be less risk averse to jump onto this. And I think when you see the initial, and I think this will drive a speculative bump in the price of BTC, because there'll be lots of money flowing in. And I think where I kind of come in from as a cypherpunk, I'm indifferent to that. But I do see an upside, which is you are going to see liquidity going into Bitcoin. And at some point, the question is going to be, well, what does this do? What was this meant to do? And the majority of people are just going to be, who will be putting money into the ETFs, they're just looking for basic financial returns. And credit to them, they're using the tools that they understand to do that. That's fine. I have no issue with that. But there's going to be a proportion of them that go, okay, this thing has now gone up. And I think we'll still see the inevitable up and then down. And when it goes down, when we get into the bear phase of whatever cycle this is, people are going to start questioning, well, we've got this asset, what do we do with it? Now, the nice thing is that over the last 8 years since I've been directly involved in crypto, we are seeing huge developments in the DEX space. You know, as I said, as you pointed out, I'm an advisor to Basic Swap DEX, which is the world's most anonymous and secure decentralized exchange. But I'm also an advisor to the Particl project, and we've built the world's most secure, anonymous, decentralized marketplace for these goods. And what I'm trying to say to you is there are huge avenues for privacy-focused e-commerce, privacy-focused currency exchange, privacy-focused arbitrage, you know, the truly digitized Swiss banking for high net worth individuals. I think there are a lot, you know, real world assets, tokenized. You know, I'm not a huge fan of NFTs for art, but I'm a massive fan of NFTs if they could be used for to microfractionate real estate. So if we can get, you know, all of this stuff has been building the regulatory frameworks to tokenize real world assets, you know, the technology to build decentralized marketplaces, the technology to have decentralized privacy-focused forex, Swiss-style forex, digital, Swiss-style e-commerce that's, you know, digital, Swiss-style real-world asset management, digital. You know, all of that stuff's been built over the last 8 years, and it's continuing to develop. So I think whilst we may see a speculative bull run, when we get to that bear, by the time we get to that bear, all of this technology I've just mentioned, it's already there, and it's already quite mature, and it's probably going to be, you know, commercially ready for, you know, your average retail user. If I'm being honest, the stuff that we're doing with Particl and Basic Swap DEX, we're probably going to have web front ends by the end of 2024, realistically, and that's going to make it viable for, you know, casual end users. Sorry, I'm shilling my projects. What I'm trying to say to you is there's a lot of real world use case to draw the liquidity that's absorbed from fiat into this currently speculative space. It's still speculative, and it has to stay speculative because it's in a growth phase. And it's in a growth phase because you can't supplant an existing system without integrating yourself into it in some way. That's the reality. It's a really cold, hard reality, but you can't have a revolution without deeply understanding the system that you're fighting against, and in some way trying to work with and utilize the systems that are currently in place to enable the transition from an old system into a new one. So you need to utilize your existing infrastructure to an extent. So what I'm trying to say to you is, even though you'll see that liquidity boom in terms of speculative valuations, when we hit the next bear, we'll already be set up to have the next bull run a lot more quickly. And it will probably be in the provision of services rather than speculative instruments. So I think this is a net positive for the cypherpunk movement. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, amazing. Definitely love it. Love what you've laid out there. And like you're saying, it not to get too weird, but I see members of the Mice Media, Dr. Liberty from the Mice Media group. So I'll wax a tiny bit political here, but it's like the Gaddafi problem, right? You can take out the old guard, but you can't always. I mean, unless you, like you said, unless you've studied all the influences, all of the mechanisms that their current administration has in place. then good luck trying to replace them. In fact, good luck doing better, right? By taking them out. We always love to talk about slashing and burning, especially as libertarians. We love to talk about slashing and burning. We don't love talking about all the necessary surveys to be able to replace what was there before, right? So we don't lose out or completely destabilize everything that society has going for it right now, flawed or not. We have to come up with a reasonable replacement. Absolutely love that thesis, Dr. Cap.